Hello and welcome to Irlam Station. My name is Neil MacArthur and I'm the chairman of the Hamilton Davies Trust. The Trust refurbished the station 5 years ago now and opened it up for the use that you see behind us today. But today we're going to take you down to a new addition to the station, which is a signal box that dates back to 1884. So if you follow me down the platform, we'll go and see what's going on in the signal box. So here we are a little bit further down Manchester platform, and you see behind me the signal box. Irlam had a signal box of its own which was just a little further down, about 100 yards further down here, and it was demolished in 1970. The signal box you see behind me today is almost identical in size, but it originates from Keighley Junction. This particular box is built by the Midland Railway, who was a partner in the Cheshire Lines committee, hence the boxes were very similar in size and in architecture. The box dates back to 1884, when Keighley Junction with the Worth Valley Railway line controlled a junction in that area, and it's the oldest surviving Midland Railway signal box in the UK. The signal box is Grade 2 listed, and Network Rail needed to preserve it. So in 2018 the Heritage Rail Trust agreed with us to have it transported over from Yorkshire here at Irlam to form part of a small signal museum, on the understanding that we'd look after it in perpetuity. So here we are in the signal yard, and this is the area outside the signal box where we've got a collection of signals throughout the ages of steam. The whole purpose of a signal box is to ensure the safety on the railway. It controls the movement of trains around the track and the various sidings across the network. The one thing about trains is that they're very, very heavy and they have very low rolling friction, and therefore they need very long distances to stop. So in the early days of the rail in the 1800s, collisions were very frequent. And as railway safety improved, signalling and the protection that they could give trains and the control of trains through the points, the various signals and the track circuits dramatically improved the railway safety. And all the components you see here are all about the control of the trains on the track, and that is the primary aim of a signal box. So in a few minutes we'll go up the stairs and we'll take a look at the upper part of the signal box. But just before we do, I'd just like to explain a little bit about the signal box. The upper part of the signal box is called the operating floor, and it's where the signalmen would have been able to have a good view of all the goings on surrounding the station, and they'd have controlled the levers that move the signals. The downstairs part of the signal box is called the locking room, and as you can see here, often the signal department, the engineers used to occupy the lower part of the signal, and it's where all the mechanical equipment is that actually connects the levers to the signals and the points. And in the later years more electrical equipment crept in as well. So we'll get a chance to see both of these in a few moments. So please follow me upstairs to the operational floor. So here we are on the operating floor of the signal box. In its heyday this would have been a very busy environment because this was a very busy line. The levers control the signals and the points on the line, and the signalmen would have kept a record of all the trains that were coming and going through, and depending upon where they were going would have adjusted the track accordingly. This is a Great Western Railway level crossing wheel, so it's not originally from Irlam or Keighley, but actually it's a fine example of how a signalman would have controlled the operating of gates at a level crossing. Well, let's spend a few minutes now talking about what we call the block shelf and all the instruments that are upon it. As electricity was used more and more in the control systems and the signal boxes, instruments were developed to help with rail safety. And all these instruments are typical of what you'd have seen in the Irlam box in the 1950s. At the centre of the block shelf is a diagram that's a track diagram which we've taken from the 1950s and shows the intense layout of the track around Irlam in that particular area. It was servicing all the various factories, the engineering works, the matchworks, the wallpaper works, and principally the steel works and the ship canal company. Just going to the far end of the box shelf, you'll see a bell. And these bells were the way that signalmen communicated between the various signal boxes down the line. And from Irlam, the signalmen would have been able to communicate with Irmston, with this one, Flixton, which is the adjacent box down the line this direction, and towards Glazebrook or Glazebrook East, he would have used this bell. And these large instruments on the block shelf are the way the signalman communicated between the other signal boxes and controlled the trains in the blocks to ensure rail safety. Smaller instruments to tell the signalman the state of the signals and whether the lamps within those signals are working. So just looking from the other end of the signal box, the first thing to note here is a typical booking in desk. And here you would have a clerk that would sit with a book open, and every train that was passing through the network in Irlam would have been logged by the booking clerk. So a box typical of this may have had 2, maybe 3 staff in, depending upon the busy times of day. On the wall behind you here we can see a few instruments, such as the way we control the electrical power on that. Telephones were prevalent, perhaps not in 1884, but certainly as you headed towards 1900, telephones became one of the methods of signalmen communicating between each other and other places on the network. So today's a nice warm day, and it's quite bright, so it's actually quite pleasant to have all the glass in the box. But of course, in the depths of winter, it would have been a very cold environment, and all signal boxes had a good supply of coal, and a typical fire like this, where a kettle would have been constantly on the boil for snatching the occasional brew between the busy arrival of the trains. I could ask you to follow me down the signal yard now, and we'll go and have a look in the lower part of the signal box, which you recall I mentioned earlier we call the locking room. So we're now downstairs in what we call the locking room. When the box arrived from Keighley, unfortunately the condition of the lower floor here was very bad. Once it'd been moved, and we'd seen a lot of damage to the floor, so unfortunately we had to replace a lot of the timbers in the walls. However, the timbers that you see in the roof are the original box which support the operational floor above. In order to get a faithful representation of the locking room, the joiners visited Settle Station and effectively copied Settle Box, which is a slightly newer box than the one we have here in Irlam, but in other ways it's almost identical. The locking room is principally to contain the mechanical equipment which connects the levers in the operating floor above to the points and the signals which are outside and to the front of the box. It does this through a series of drop bars onto these balance bars, which will also have weights on, and then these pull the chains that go through the wall, and they drive the wires that pull the signals and so on. These instruments that you see here in front of us are called locks, electrical locks, and these form the modern electrical locking. And when I say modern, really the 1940s, late 40s and early 50s, but they added the sophistication to the interlocking that added to rail safety. As we move down the box here and we move to position 13, these longer rods here driving the cranks at the bottom control the points. So they don't have these balance bars that we see here with the signal levers. Similarly, the cranks drive rods that go out through the front of the box and alter the points. So that's enough about the contents of the locking room, and I'd just like to say a big thank you to everybody that contributed to the refurbishment scene here in Irlam. So that brings us to the end of our virtual tour, and thank you for watching. On behalf of the Hamilton Davies Trust, I'd like to say thank you very much to all the people who've helped in this, my colleagues within the Trust, the staff of the station, our friends group and the Railway Heritage Trust. And if you'd like to hear more about the station or visit the station and the signal box, please do get in touch.